When it comes to oil in the world, Kuwait is one of the top suppliers of it. Dating all the way back to the mid-1930s, the country has been drilling and producing oil for the country's needs. The name of the big oil company in Kuwait is KOC, which stands for Kuwait Oil Company. But how did this all start? How did they get so advanced? What procedures do they take to produce and export oil? In these next couple of slides, we will discuss how Kuwait made its name in the oil industry. Some of the points that we will touch on in this presentation about oil in Kuwait are Oil Sector Organization, PNZ Sector Organization, Exploration and Production, Partition Neutral Zone, the Wafro Oil Field, Chevron and PNZ, Exports and Consumption, Project Kuwait, Refining, and the Clean Fuels Project.
Kuwait's oil sector is owned by its government. It is overseen by the SPC, led by the Prime Minister, and consists of 6 ministers and 6 representatives from the private sector. The Ministry of Petroleum manages policy implementation in the sector. KPC is Kuwait's national oil company and was formed in 1975 after the government of Kuwait acquired the then independent company KOC. Underneath KPC is KOC, KNPC, KPI, and KUFPEC. KOC manages the exploration, drilling, and production of oil and gas within Kuwait. KNPC oversees refining and manages the 3 largest refineries in Kuwait. KPI handles the marketing and refining of oil outside of Kuwait and manages 2 refineries, Europort and Malazzo. KUFPEC currently handles KPC's affairs in Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, the Far East, and Australia. The partition neutral zone between Saudi Arabia and Kuwait has its own companies to manage its onshore and offshore activities. The onshore sector was developed by American Independent Oil Company, while Getty Oil developed many onshore fields. Getty Oil was eventually taken over by Chevron, and Chevron continues to have a hand in the exploration, production, refining, and shipping of oil in the PNZ. Arabian Oil Company initially had control of the offshore sector on behalf of both Saudi Arabia and Kuwait. In 2000, Aramco Gulf Operations Company took over Saudi Arabia's interest in the PNZ, and KGOC took over Kuwait's. KGOC and AGOC formed the joint operating company KJO in 2000, and KJO is now responsible for managing offshore PNZ production.
Oil exploration dates all the way back to the mid-1930s. The first well was discovered in North Bahar, and it was named Bergen. Exploration was booming in Kuwait all the way up until 1960, when the country hit a decrease for a 30-year period. Then, in 1991, seismic exploration was introduced to the country after the 1991 liberation. They used 3 types of seismic waves: 2D waves, 3D waves, and 4D waves. 2D waves showed shallow parts of the Cretaceous reservoirs and deep into the Jurassic and Permian levels. Kuwait is known for using the first 3D data. The data would offer more complex and extensive information of the oil fields. As for 4D waves, the country only used them to study reservoirs in the Middle East. The future looks bright for the oil exploration in Kuwait. Some plans for the future are as follows: producing a high-resolution 3D land survey, utilizing over 210,000 single sensor channels, which will be the most ever used in the industry, 2D offshore surveys and 3D transition zone surveys, and finally, a new in-house processing center with more advanced hardware and software. Oil production first began in Kuwait back on February 22, 1938, where oil was discovered in the Bergen field. The people of Kuwait first noticed oil when they discovered black paths of a bituminous substance located all throughout the desert. KOC has more than 12 developed oil fields. These fields are broken up into 4 main regions: the North Field, the South Field, the East Field, and the West Field. The company's headquarters are located near the East and South Fields. Production runs through the oil operation facilities. The facilities are broken up into 3 main operations: the oil wellheads, the oil flow lines and corridors, and the gathering center. KOC has wellheads that are installed with pressure ratings going anywhere from 2,000 to 5,000, but there are some fields that exceed that pressure, such as the Marat wells. Now that the oil is extracted, it is shipped to the gathering center through flow lines. Flow lines are pipelines that carry the newly produced oil. Then finally, the gathering center receives the crude oil. The crude oil goes through a multi-stage stabilization process in which gas and water are separated from the oil. Today, there are 21 gathering centers still operating in Kuwait.
In 1922, a territorial dispute between Kuwait and Saudi Arabia resulted in the Partitioned Neutral Zone, or PNZ. The PNZ has both onshore and offshore drilling sites. The sites combine to have a total capacity of about 5 billion barrels of oil and 1 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. Almost all of the offshore drilling in the PNZ comes from an extension of Saudi Arabia's largest offshore field. Onshore drilling in the Partition Neutral Zone is centered around the Wafra oil field. The Wafra oil field has an estimated 3.4 billion in combined reserves. Wafra used to be a site of abundant light oil. Now, however, Wafra is the location of an advanced type of oil extraction. To get heavy oil out of the ground, workers are using steam injection. Steam injecting is when you inject steam into the ground to heat the oil and make it less viscous, allowing it to flow to the surface. Kuwait has enlisted the help of Chevron to try to accomplish steam injecting in the PNZ. Chevron and Kuwait are important business partners, and in 2009, Chevron began the steam injection process. Chevron is now using front-end engineering and design to yield a successful process. The steam injecting is a $10 billion, 10-year project designed to produce 350,000 to 450,000 barrels per day by 2030 in the PNZ.
Exports. Kuwait exports the 7th largest amount of oil in the world compared to all other countries. This makes up about 70% of their gross domestic product, which generates about $70 billion a year worth of profits. Without this, Kuwait's economy simply would not be able to run like the way it does without all the revenue they receive from exporting all of their oil. So what does Kuwait export? This is oil related. It exports about 89% of refined oil and crude oil. 4% of its exports comes from natural gas, which you can see is way below just regular oil. And 2% is cyclic hydrocarbons. And then other non-related oil exports comes up to be about 5%. The next question would be, who does Kuwait export their oil to? The least amount would be Europe, coming in at about 80,000 barrels of oil a day. Following them is the United States, coming at 200,000 barrels of oil a day. In Asia, which takes away the lead by a lot, at 1.5 million barrels of oil a day, which is also Kuwait's own continent. And then in the top 5 countries, the top 4 of them are all also in Asia, which would be South Korea at 19%, India at 17%, Japan at 15%, and China at 11%, which you can see they're all relatively close. And then in the top 5 is the U.S. at 9%. And then out of all the other countries in the world, they make up about 29% of who Kuwait exports their oil to. Consumption. Kuwait hardly even puts a dent into the oil they consume compared to the oil that they are producing and exporting. They only consume 400,000 barrels of oil a day, while they are producing over 2 million barrels of oil a day. While they have this overabundance of oil, they are consuming more natural gas than they are producing, which results in power outages throughout the country, which happens often. In 2009, they signed a contract with Royal Dutch Shell, which imports over 500 million cubic feet of liquid natural gas a day in hopes to resolve their consumption issues and fix their power outages. Natural gas is definitely the main source of consumption throughout Kuwait.
Project Kuwait is a $7 billion 25-year plan first proposed in 1998 by the SPC to increase the country's oil production and to help compensate for declines at the mature Bergen field, with the help of international oil companies. This serves as a pivotal component to increase overall oil production capacity to 3.5 million barrels per day by 2020, which the Kuwait Oil Company admits will require the help of international oil companies. The implementation of the project halted again after Kuwait's royal family made Parliament responsible for making all the decisions in 2007. After this, Parliament barred foreign involvement, costing foreign investors huge sums of money invested in bidding for the project and alienating industry majors. During the fiscal year, there are a total of 26 approved projects that are either completed or are in the works. One of the projects that is currently in the works is intended to build a grassroots refinery at El Zaire area south of Kuwait City with a total capacity of 615,000 barrels per day. The refinery has a strategic goal of supplying low-sulfur fuel to the local power plants. This will significantly reduce pollutant emissions, and in that sense, it constitutes a special importance to the environment. After project that is currently ongoing is one of the strategic projects of the Kuwait National Petroleum Company, which aimed at upgrading and expanding the existing two refineries at El Mina Abdullah and Mina Al Amadi. The Clean Fuels project will transform the two refineries into a combined merchant refining complex that meets the requirements of the world oil market. Carrying out the project will set high safety and environment standards in line with KPC directions.
There are three main refineries in Kuwait. Mina Al Amadi producing 466,000 barrels of oil per day, Mina Al Abdullah producing 270,000 barrels per day, and Al Shuaibah producing 200,000 barrels per day. All of these refineries are owned and operated by Kuwait National Petroleum Company and are able to produce low-sulfur fuel oils by residue desulfurization. Kuwait Petroleum International manages refining and marketing operations internationally and currently has downstream interest in Asian countries such as China, Vietnam, and Indonesia. The Clean Fuels project was approved by Kuwait Supreme Petroleum Council in 2011, and it has an estimated cost of $31 billion, including the creation of the Al Zour facility. The main focus of the project is to upgrade Kuwait's current refining facilities and also increase production from 900,000 barrels of oil per day to 1.5 million barrels per day. The project involves shutting down Al Shuaibah refinery and opening the Al Zour facility, which will produce 615,000 barrels of oil per day alone.
Today, we have talked about many aspects of Kuwait. 80 years of oil production, Kuwait has persisted through power shortages during peak periods, territorial disputes, and the new division of natural gas exploration and domestic consumption. Saudi Arabian negotiations and agreements and funding by Chevron have greatly influenced the progression of Kuwait. Kuwait is not only important to the petroleum industry, but also the United States. Kuwait is so far from the United States that many think that it has no effect on Americans at all. However, that couldn't be further from the truth. Nearly 45% of the oil produced in the Wafro fields makes its way to the United States, allowing the nation of Kuwait to affect the daily lives of every U.S. citizen that travels. Kuwait has also had hand in touching the lives of those in Europe, Africa, Asia, and Australia. Kuwait's foreign petroleum exploration is currently handling many affairs in Africa, the Middle East, Southeast Asia, the Far East, and Australia. Ventures have been explored in Italy, Spain, Belgium, and the Far East. Kuwait has managed to benefit the people of the Netherlands and Italy. Kuwait Petroleum International manages the Europort refinery in the Netherlands and the Milazzo refinery in Sicily, Italy. Kuwait's presence in these places through their sophisticated refineries has provided jobs for many and improved local economies. Kuwait's advancement plans are costing millions of dollars, but the results have been potential to benefit the whole world.